Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Really interesting to hear why people are where they are, doing what they're doing. I think it's really cool. I'm not really, you can't hear about why I do it. That's a chat for another day. That's 5 beers in that one. We're talking about why soil health is a thing that we might be interested in focusing on. So we to go a bit of a different line, and hopefully from here we might get a bit of a focus on the things that are needed to make up healthy soil. So for those I haven't met, I'm Lee from Island Biologicals. Thank you to everyone that's mentioned Biocast today. It's my shout. We make a liquid vermicast at Oxley Island, so keeps me entertained, keeps me in trouble or out of trouble, depends on the day really. So we're running under the motto, life creates life. There's a lot in that for me that it just speaks to what we're trying to achieve. You can't magic life out of nothing. Life creates more life as things go along. So we'll get rolling on in. If we're going to talk about soil health, we're actually going to have to talk about plant health and microbial health. They're all absolutely joined together in this idea of a holobiont, the whole thing. You can't just talk about one or the other or whatever. And really, health is a bit of a, it's the wrong word. I had my own little health journey in the past couple of years that I think is over. We'll see. Probably not, I'm still alive. Actually, what we actually need to be talking about is wellness, the wellness of what our farm or our ecosystem, our soil is up to. So health just appears to be an absence of symptoms, and you get sent home from the doctor with, oh, you didn't die again, well done, fantastic. So, you know, that plant grew, therefore it's healthy, it didn't die of a disease, therefore, well, job done. However, there's so much more to it than that. So the soil health, the soil itself, the geological part is our mineral part of this equation. The plant is the actual driver of the whole system. It's the one utilising those minerals to turn them into milk or cheese or steak or whatever, via whatever process. The plant is driving the microbial health of that soil, which is the actual life that's going to be contained within that soil. That's going to access the mineral to feed the plant. The plant's going to feed the microbe. Hello, we're going to go around this loop again and again and again. But all of them together running well is going to give you a well ecosystem. So it's not, you can't talk, they're indivisible from each other. It's not worth mentioning one without the others. So if we do have this bit of an idea, bit of a focus on a wellness for the system, what might we gain out of it? Well, everything. I was just going to put everything there and that was going to be it, but we'll go through it. So our water cycle is actually influenced by the health and porosity of that soil. Microbes create the structure in soil that lets the water in. If they're not going so well, all the water skids off the ground and goes down into the dam, taking soil with it. Not so good. So, yeah, that's a gain in itself. So carbon's come up a couple of times, and I'm not weighing in or out of the selling carbon debate. They'll obviously have some opinions. But if we create carbon for its own sake in our soil, we're creating humus. We're creating this building block of life. Now, human and humus allegedly come from the same Latin word, although if you go on the internet, you might find there's some varying opinions. I can't imagine that from the internet. So I left that one out. But carbon is 67% of the humus or organic matter within our soil. So if we're increasing carbon overall, we're probably increasing a lot of good things, a lot of things in our soil. So without going into the carbon debate, it's worth doing for its own sake. The full genetic expression of plants, what makes a tomato taste like a tomato, it relies on the health of that soil, the diversity of microbes within it. Most of those things, flavonoids, terpenes, etc., are mediated by microbial actions. So a plant can't really get anywhere without those health elements, wellness elements from within that soil, without a good pump system. So, hydroponics can grow you a tomato, but essentially it's crunchy water. So it hasn't filled out, the fullness of its genetic potential can only be realised in one of those pump microbial systems. Greater land use efficiency. Cam was talking about running more animals per hectare, or was that someone else? Was I at a different talk? We hear this idea of we'll never feed the gazillion people in the world unless we run multi-storey hydroponics farms and feedlots and all sorts of malarkey. If we just use our land to its full efficiency, I really think we will go a long way. Not wasting food mightn't be another bad thing to think about, but that's another chat. But to use it efficiently, it has to be running well. Pest and disease resistance. Once again, the protective factors that a plant has of its own are actually mediated by microbial activity. So the signals that a plant requires to enact a thing that's going to keep pests or diseases at bay needs pumped microbial system to actually make it happen. So, diseases aren't a fungus in a plant. Is it a fungicide deficiency? Something else is missing that isn't enabling something else to happen. Abiotic stress resistance. Now, apparently the idea of a season, what a season looks like, is well out the window now. So we'll go hot, cold, dry, raining, all in 1 week. We just don't know what's around the corner. So if we can, instead of being big spikes and big dips in what's going on, if we can just ride this more gentle wave, going into drought later, maybe not waterlogging so hard. My place has been wet now for 8 weeks. Can't do much about it, but we're going to have to just deal within it. Right, that's a lovely blank slide. So everything we actually do on our place has a bearing on what our system wellness is actually up to. Every action, positive or negative. Now, I'd like to suggest that whatever you do, just have it in your head. What will this do for my soil health? Which direction am I going to drive it? So some positives. Really, like diversity is a huge positive. So to have that diversity of plant, diversity of microbiology, it's very hard to have a thing function well on a single thing. So imagine yourself only being able to eat kale. That's it for the rest of your life. That's all you got. It's relatively healthy within itself. However, it's going to get bland real quick. And your system, your functioning is going to probably not prosper from just eating kale. Animal management, we have heard from several of the speakers today. It's interesting, I've got actually all of Cam Laurie's slides seemingly. We seem to be making the same points. But the management of those animals are really, really critical to how the whole thing stays well. Overgrazing or unmanaged animals on stream sides and so on, generally not so good. So positive animal management, thoughtful animal management, really important. Diversity, I think I've mentioned this before. We'll get back to it. Biostimulants, well, the idea of feeding the soil or stimulating an action to happen to help the plants grow rather than directly fertilising with a mineral that we think that needs it's a different approach. It's not, it needs to still be used as management. It isn't a silver bullet by any stretch, but it is in lots of ways enhancing the wellness of that whole thing. Diversity seems to be coming up a lot. once again, it just can't function as just a single thing. We can send stuff downhill pretty well. We're pretty good at this one. I think as a species, we go pretty well at mucking things up, whether we mean to or don't mean to. We seem to just be good at it. Set stocking, it doesn't matter what other things you're up to. If you just let animals just eat whatever they want and go wherever they want, it's going to be hard to have a good, well position from that. Monocultures, same again, it's the kale thing all over again. It just will not support diversity of microbiology if there's only one thing growing. Excessive synthetic ferts, now I'm not suggesting that no ferts, or I'm not particularly a zealot on this today, but it's kind of, if the plant is absolutely reliant on water-soluble fertiliser for its nutrition, there's going to cut off a whole world of biology that would have been feeding it. So, and then from doing that, the plant is going to stop returning exudates to the soil because these microbes are there being lazy buggers eating carbohydrates that they don't need to give away. So you're busting a whole system that's giving you a lot of things for free with excessive things. Sides, things that rhyme with suicide, probably got to get used a bit cautiously. So probably trying to think about why the thing is there. So, you know, weeds aren't necessarily a herbicide deficiency. They are growing there for another reason potentially, and apparently they're not weeds, Glenn, they're actually just plants. Yeah, they're not going to cause a downfall of society after all. It's amazing. But they're doing a job. They're returning exudates via photosynthesis into that soil. So I'd take the weed over the bare soil any day of the week. You cannot have any photosynthetic return to keep the microbial stuff healthy if you don't have any plants. It just can't happen. So this is the point of the year where my accountant just loves me. 1 + 1 + 1 = 15. We had a field day in Dungog that several people here were at. We came up with this idea that more plus more equals more, but actually equals more squared, or I don't know how many figures we ended up to the power of by the end of the day after we finished talking about it. But this idea of a consortium, the whole thing, all in there together, it's always more than just a single thing. So you could say, oh, those tillage radishes that Marty grew at Ningen, gee, they really kicked my place off. But if they're there in a whole group of other things, they're one part of this thing. You know, it's like saying that the chicken stock cube really made the soup what it was, but it's all the things in the soup that actually make the thing happen. It's not just, you can't separate it out and say, well, that's the thing. It adds up differently with more bits in it. So if you look at something like this, for everything you've got going up that's a different shape, something going down is a complete different shape as well. So let's say you had ryegrass and ryegrass. It's all trying to perform the same function as each other in that setting. So all of those root zones of all of that ryegrass is roughly trying to be in exactly the same place as each other. You start putting some shapes in there, you got stuff going down, across, under, over. It stops being a competition at that point, and you've got a collaboration. So apart from root architecture and shape, you've got things operating at different depths, so they're sending root exudates lower into the soil. You've got more things happening deeper, you've got things happening up the top. Every plant there can support a different biome from the plant next door. So once again, if you've got ryegrass and ryegrass, it can support a biome that ryegrass is happy about. You've got all these things, you've got all this stuff happening. It's like it becomes a zoo. Each biome will be there doing a different function. So some biomes require more phosphorus, for example. So that biome will be there fetching more phosphorus for whichever happy plant they're trying to be associated with. Other plants are able to pick up on that and be part of that. There's also this idea that, that's the unofficial bell, within that biome, there's the ability for plant and microbe, and plant, microbe and microbe, to exchange genetics with each other. Lovely process called horizontal gene exchange, horizontal gene transfer. Now that's actually a 10-beer conversation. I'm up for it later if anyone's interested. But it still requires a lot of things to be going on in order for any of it to go on. There needs to be all of these choices for things to happen. So let's say our sorghum, not pictured, is growing next to a radish. She put a radish in there? She put a dandelion. Yeah. This is Nicole Masters' picture. She'll be expecting a phone call. Well done. 10 to go or 10? 10 to go. Oh, far out. Yeah. Yeah, fine, we're not talking about that anymore. Yeah, frog and grasshopper, that's exactly what it is. You look at, so this is within a multi-species at Chris's place. For some reason that sums up everything about a multi to me, this idea of diversity. Okay, that grasshopper might be bad, evil grasshopper, look at it, got bad intentions, but there's the guy next door is probably going to keep him in check. So we could get all upset about a grasshopper and go and spray him into submission, or we could increase his resistance. We could, but we could increase. Maybe we could just focus on increasing who likes our grasshopper. So everyone loves a ladybird in the garden, right? You can't have a ladybird without some aphids there for it to eat. So it has to be this balance. So it took a bit of thinking about, probably quite late at night, but there are really no good and bad organisms. There's just good and bad balance of organisms. So if we can keep the balance in there, a lot of stuff's not going to be really a big deal. So apparently we've got a bit of a fall armyworm problem in some places, and it looks pretty ordinary. But Chris, have they turned up? Or have they done you any great detriment if they have turned up? Yeah, so some places are entirely wiped out within days. Generally a monoculture, it's like a bed and breakfast. Check it out. Everything we could ever want all in one place. But even if they came there and ate all of your sorghum or your millet, there's all these other things going on that, you're getting away with a lot of stuff. So what can we find for ourselves that starts indicating positions of where we're at in our wellness of our system? And this, you can do lots of testing of lots of stuff. I've done lots of biological testing, that's why I can't afford shoes. It gets really expensive really quickly, but probably your two best things you can have as far as monitoring goes, go to Bunnings and buy yourself a nice little garden spade. Go and look at things with your eyes and think about it. Like critical thought. Chris is there looking like he's praying in the paddock, looking at stuff on the ground. That really, they're the things that we're going to see with our own eyes, that we can say, right, this is where our position is headed. Earthworms is a fantastic indicator. What, I thought you said I got a boogie. Use your nose. Absolutely, the smell of the soil, but dig a hole. What's the porosity doing? Is there structure to this soil? Is it, do we have these dreadlocks on roots? But these are things that can. I'm not up to that. Really, just tell us really simply, are we going well or not well? So worms in the system, worms require a decent amount of organic material. They're detritivores. They'll also create, fantastic pathways into the soil and so on, but they can't be there if the environment's hostile. So you're starting to create a biologically pumped environment whilst they consume detritus. They're actually digesting the microbiology that's all over that detritus. So if you're running this system with heaps of things going on, you've got lots of worms, right? Things are cycling well. Things are going great. Starting to go great. Right, so if you've got 10 per shovel, per 25 centimetre soil cube, you're starting to go really well. That's 2.5 million worms per hectare. They're doing a lot of work out there for not a great deal of pay. They're better than tractors in a lot of ways. So another really great indicator is these riser sheaths, these dreadlocks on plants. If you pull a plant out and there's nothing stuck to the roots, there's brown roots sticking out of nowhere, or it's not having that association with the microbiology. So this is a biofilm stuck around the roots, and you can have it right from the first day, right? So seed on the far side there, that's 48 hours planted. It's already developing those relationships with the soil microbes that's going on. So there is a biome within the seed that's going to come out and help that plant through its life, but there's also a gazillion, approximately, microbes in that soil that's going to aid that plant to grow. So those sheaths, that biofilm, you can think of it like a really, really simple organism. So bacteria essentially is a single-celled organism, so a whole bunch of them together is like its own super being. They're doing its thing. So another great indicator is if your plant's growing like that, if it's growing roots before it grows upwards. And what do you get out of that? We'll come back to that. So if you've got that, you can see the background, it's not looking real good. You've got moisture sealed around the roots. You've got as much root down as you've got top up. If it forgets to rain, you're a lot further into the soil than our little mate here. So the root to shoot ratio is another good biological indicator generally that, okay, we've got some potential for resilience here. Now that didn't go very well. That didn't go very well either because it really, really forgot to rain in 2018 in Armidale. You might remember, Glenn. It was a bit tough. Yeah, that's at Loch McPhee's, that one. But so within that riser sheath, there's all these microaggregates, and inside all of those microaggregates probably is a free-living nitrogen-fixing bacteria. So we all wave our arms about legumes, and we're all told that legumes sequester nitrogen. All plants can sequester their own nitrogen. So in the same way that a bacteria seals itself in the nodules of a legume, this bacteria sealed itself within the aggregates of the soil. So it's inside there fixing nitrogen in a mysterious process that I've got no idea how to describe properly. That's all stuck together by glomalin, which is microbe spit, but that's the structure of the soil essentially. It's forming all these little balls of soil that have airspace in between them, going to allow water in quicker and air in quicker. The largest mineral pool in the soil should be oxygen, but often isn't. So the places you're trying to drive a shovel in and it's trying to bend its way back up and look at you, not going to have a lot of oxygen. A lot of things are really going to struggle to live in that. You start getting this more open soil, you've got a whole lot more potential for lots and lots of things to happen. Now, if you look at that little root there, that's about 2 mil wide, that whole root thing. So there's a lot of stuff going on immediately around that's that really powerful zone to enhance. How am I going, Daintree? Oh, 2 minutes. All right. Oh no, I might go home now. Yeah, this is the introduction. We're not quite finishing on this note, but I actually thought this was pretty bang on. So I was on a Zoom meeting with Martin and Joel Salatin back last year or this year through a thing we were doing with a group called Soil Restoration Farming. He come out with this somewhere in there, and I probably forgot the rest of the day, but nature's default position is wellness. I thought, wow, that's pretty cool, isn't it? Because basically the gist of it, without being pointed and without pointing the finger at anybody except everybody, is if something's going wrong, if something is unwell in your system, probably some intervention that people did is probably the cause of it. Unfortunately, it's probably true. So if you let it go, just let the paddock go. It'll return itself to wellness, whatever that looks like. So all those thistles or all those whatever is a way of returning back to a well position. We obviously know better because we know everything, and we'll go and poison them or whatever. But pretty well, it's always trying to get itself back to a position of wellness. I think where our body would be the same, but some of the inputs aren't so good. So think about that. Why is it going? What position was set here? What conditions have been set on this property or this paddock, this landscape in the past that has put us in a position of not being quite as well as we could be? Now there's a slide there that relates to absolutely nothing, but absolutely relates to absolutely everything. And I looked at it and I couldn't get away from it. And I wasn't going to put it in, but I was going to put it in. So Chris was talking about some of the things that are advised or considered best management or whatever. So that photo is a thylacine from 1925, looking fairly deceased, and we all know what happened to them in the end. But there was a bounty on them until 1902. So this guy's 23 years past the bounty, still shooting them, probably under the guise of best practice. So best practice, it should be an ever-shifting position. However, I think in agriculture, some of our best practices have been set, and there's, so beg your pardon? Set and forget. So if it was the best practice in 1974, it's the best practice now. But as we learn more, we must be able to shift that position forwards to meet the things that we now know about it. So the leaps and bounds in what we understand about microbiomes and plant microbe connections and carbon, and we should be shifting it. Our practices should move with that. However, they don't seem to. And I think, sadly, that kind of says it. What was the function of that animal? We'll never actually know what its true function in the landscape was. And I think we put ourselves in a position to do the same thing to the rest of our landscape through not moving our best practices forward. It can never be static. So I hope that we can start considering this idea of what position, what action are we taking, which direction is this going to take our wellness of our overall system. So everything we do, every action has a processionary consequence, whether it be a good thing, so more things come out of it. So for example, Chris, when we were at his place, said, okay, the multi-species crop, pretty awesome, and it was. But what comes out of it in the next planting is even better, right? So there's a really positive processionary consequence. So we could do something like go and herbicide the kikuyu because we didn't like it anymore. What's the processionary consequence of that? So we've removed growing grass, that's a negative. It's not returning anything to the soil, that's a negative. We've chelated minerals, that's a negative. We've allowed pathogens to kill that plant, that's a negative. So we're putting all these negatives and now we're going to grow something out of it. That position is backwards. So then, okay, if we've tied manganese up and we get that plant's not producing good lignin, probably going to get attacked by fall armyworm. We're probably in a position of some other consequence down the line that we've then got to use something else to try and knock on the head. Playing agricultural whack-a-mole, another thing sticks its head up and we've got to try and whack it with a bigger hammer to try and overcome that thing. That probably all of those things could have been aided by having a focus on the wellness of that overall system in that setting. So